What happens when the man you thought would always forgive you delivers a divorce petition to your door, backed by evidence you never saw him collect? How did the house he bought become the stage for your own undoing? And why did his silent, methodical response sting worse than any argument? This is the story of how I looked for better and ended up losing everything the right way. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The champagne bubbles tickled my throat as I surveyed our new living room, filled with friends and family celebrating our housewarming party. Simon had outdone himself with this place, a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in Westfield's most coveted neighborhood. White picket fence, wraparound porch, even a tire swing hanging from the old oak tree in the backyard. It was everything I'd pinned on my Pinterest boards for years, so why did I feel so empty inside? "Alethea, this place is absolutely gorgeous," my sister Jessica gushed, her wine glass already half empty, despite arriving only 20 minutes ago. Simon really went all out. The granite countertops, those hardwood floors. Girl, you're living the dream. I forced a smile, watching my husband across the room as he explained the house's smart home features to his mother Vivian and our friends Colin and Leah Delaney. Simon's voice carried that same flat, practical tone he used when discussing quarterly budget reports at work. No excitement, no romance, just facts and figures about square footage and property taxes. "He bought it like he was purchasing office equipment," I muttered, then caught myself. "I mean, he's very thorough, always thinking about the investment potential." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Investment potential? Honey, the man bought you a dream house. Most women would kill for a husband who makes that kind of commitment." "It's not about the house," I said, lowering my voice. "It's about why he bought it. He thinks throwing money at problems fixes everything. We've been having issues, and instead of actually talking to me about them, he just buys a house, like that proves he loves me." The truth was more complicated. Simon had been distant for months, buried in his IT projects, coming home late, falling asleep in front of his laptop. We hadn't had a real conversation, not about us, not about our future, not about anything that mattered. In weeks. The house felt like a consolation prize, a way to keep me occupied while he remained emotionally unavailable. "Maybe he's just not good at expressing himself," Jessica suggested. "Some men show love through actions, not words." "Some men show love through control," I countered, then immediately felt guilty. That wasn't fair. Simon wasn't controlling. He was just absent, present in body, absent in spirit. Across the room, I noticed someone new talking to Colin. Tall, dark-haired, with an easy smile that actually reached his eyes. He looked familiar, but I couldn't quite place him. "Who's that?" I asked Jessica, nodding toward the stranger. "That's Tom Delaney, Colin's brother. He just moved back from Chicago. Didn't you meet him at Colin and Leah's wedding years ago?" The name clicked. Tom had been Colin's best man, charming and funny during his speech. He'd been married then, living in Illinois. I remembered thinking he seemed like the type of man who actually listened when you talked. "What's he doing here?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "He's working at your insurance company now, actually. Colin mentioned he might be stopping by tonight. His wife stayed in Chicago with their kids. They're getting divorced." Something fluttered in my stomach. Not attraction exactly, but curiosity. Here was a man who understood what it felt like when a marriage fell apart. Someone who might actually comprehend the loneliness I'd been feeling. As if sensing my thoughts, Tom looked over and caught my eye. He smiled, a real, warm smile, and started walking toward us. "You must be Alethea," he said, extending his hand. "Tom Delaney. I think we met briefly at Colin's wedding, but that was 8 years ago. Congratulations on the new house. It's beautiful." His handshake lingered just a moment longer than necessary. His eyes stayed focused on mine while he spoke, like I was the only person in the room worth talking to. "Thank you," I said, acutely aware that Simon hadn't complimented the house once since we'd moved in. "Are you settling in well? Jessica mentioned you're working at Meridian Insurance now." "Starting Monday, actually. I'll be in the commercial claims division. I hear you're one of their star adjusters." I felt myself blushing. When was the last time someone had called me a star at anything? "I do my best," I said. "The work can be challenging, but I enjoy helping people rebuild after disasters." "That's exactly the kind of attitude they need," Tom said. "Maybe you could show me around the office sometime. Help me figure out where everything is." "Of course," I replied, probably too quickly. "I'd be happy to." Jessica excused herself to get another drink, leaving Tom and me alone. We talked easily about work, about the neighborhood, about his transition back to the area. He asked thoughtful questions and actually listened to my answers. When I mentioned feeling overwhelmed by the move, he nodded with genuine understanding. "Change is hard, even when it's positive," he said. "Sometimes getting everything you thought you wanted makes you realize you're not sure what you actually need." His words hit deeper than they should have. This stranger understood something about my situation that my own husband seemed oblivious to. "Alethea." Simon's voice cut through our conversation. He appeared beside us, his expression neutral but his jaw slightly tense. "I see you've met Tom." "We were just talking about the insurance business," I said, though that wasn't entirely true. We'd been talking about life, about feelings, about things that mattered. "Tom's starting at Meridian on Monday," Simon said. "Small world." "Very small," Tom agreed. "Your wife was kind enough to offer to show me around the office." Something flickered across Simon's face. Not quite jealousy, but awareness. He nodded politely. "That's thoughtful of her. Alethea's always been helpful to new people." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, but the dynamic had shifted. Simon remained physically present but emotionally distant, contributing facts and logistics, while Tom and I shared actual thoughts and feelings. The contrast was stark and, frankly, embarrassing. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home and we were cleaning up, Simon finally spoke. "Nice party," he said, loading glasses into the dishwasher with mechanical precision. "Yes, it was," I agreed, though I found myself thinking more about my conversation with Tom than the party overall. "Tom seems like a decent guy," Simon continued. "Colin speaks highly of him." "He seems very professional," I replied carefully. Simon nodded and continued cleaning. No questions about what we'd discussed, no curiosity about my day or my feelings about the new house. Just practical observations and efficient cleanup. That night, lying in bed beside my husband, I stared at the ceiling of our beautiful new bedroom and felt more alone than ever. Simon fell asleep within minutes, his breathing deep and regular, while I replayed my conversation with Tom. The way he'd looked at me, really seen me, made me feel like a person worth knowing. My phone buzzed with a text message. I grabbed it quickly, not wanting to wake Simon. "Thanks for the warm welcome tonight. Looking forward to working with you. Tom." I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Welcome to the neighborhood. See you Monday." It was innocent enough, professional, friendly. So why did it feel like the beginning of something dangerous? Monday morning arrived with typical New England crispness, and I found myself taking extra care with my appearance. Not for Tom, I told myself, just because I wanted to make a good impression as someone showing a new colleague around. The navy blue dress that Simon never seemed to notice, the lipstick that made me feel confident, the perfume I'd been saving for special occasions. Meridian Insurance occupied 3 floors of a downtown office building, and I'd worked there for 6 years. I knew every corner, every personality, every office politics dynamic. It was my territory, my expertise, and for once, I felt valuable. Tom arrived at 9 sharp, looking professional in a charcoal grey suit that fit him perfectly. He carried himself with quiet confidence, greeting the receptionist warmly and remembering her name from their brief phone conversation the week before. Ready for the grand tour? I asked, approaching the lobby. Absolutely, he said, and that smile again, the one that made me feel like I was interesting, worth his attention. I spent the morning showing him around the building, introducing him to key colleagues, explaining our case management systems. He asked intelligent questions and made thoughtful observations about our processes. Unlike Simon, who often seemed distracted during conversations, Tom gave me his complete attention. You really know this place inside and out, he said, as we grabbed coffee in the break room. How long have you been here? 6 years, I replied. Started right out of college, worked my way up from entry-level claims processor to senior adjuster. That's impressive. You must be good at what you do. I try to be thorough, I said, then found myself adding, sometimes I think I'm better at solving other people's problems than my own. Tom raised an eyebrow. What kind of problems? I hesitated. This was dangerous territory. Personal conversation with an attractive colleague I barely knew. But something about his manner invited confidence. Just the usual stuff, I said carefully. Marriage, life, figuring out what makes you happy. Ah, he said, understanding flickering in his eyes. I know something about that. My divorce finalized last month. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. Don't be. Sometimes things run their course, you know. People grow apart, stop really seeing each other. His words resonated painfully. When was the last time Simon had really seen me? Not just acknowledged my presence, but actually looked at me like I was someone he wanted to know. That must be difficult, I said. It is, but also liberating in some ways. For the first time in years, I can be honest about what I want, what I need. No more pretending everything's fine when it isn't. Our conversation was interrupted by Leah entering the break room. She greeted Tom warmly. They'd known each other for years through Colin, but her smile seemed forced when she looked at me. How's the orientation going? She asked. Alethea's been incredibly helpful, Tom replied. I couldn't ask for a better guide. Leah nodded, but I caught something in her expression. Concern, suspicion. I realized how our conversation might have looked. Two people leaning close together, talking in low voices about personal matters. The rest of the week fell into a pattern. Tom and I worked on several cases together, and our professional relationship quickly became comfortable, then friendly. He had a way of making even the most tedious insurance claims feel interesting. More importantly, he made me feel competent and valued. You have excellent instincts, he told me Friday afternoon as we reviewed a complex commercial fire claim. The way you spotted those inconsistencies in the witness statements, that probably saved the company $50,000. I glowed under his praise. Simon never commented on my work anymore, never asked about my cases or celebrated my successes. Tom made me remember why I'd been good at my job in the first place. Want to grab a drink after work? He asked casually. I know a place downtown. Nothing fancy, just a chance to unwind after the first week. I should have said no. I knew I should have said no. But the thought of going home to Simon's distracted silence felt unbearable. Just one drink, I said. I need to get home to my daughter. The bar Tom chose was small and intimate, with exposed brick walls and soft lighting. We found a corner table and ordered wine. The conversation flowed easily, ranging from work to books to travel to life philosophies. Tom was well-read, funny, and genuinely interested in my opinions. You're not what I expected, he said after our second glass of wine. What did you expect? Someone more settled, I guess, content with the suburban dream. But you seem like you're searching for something. Maybe I am, I admitted. Sometimes I feel like I'm living someone else's life, like I made all the right choices on paper, but they don't actually make me happy. What would make you happy? It was such a simple question, but I realized I hadn't asked myself that in years. I'd been so focused on checking boxes: good husband, nice house, stable job, well-behaved child, that I'd forgotten to consider whether those boxes represented what I actually wanted. I don't know, I said honestly. Being seen, I think. Being valued for who I am, not just what I provide. You deserve that, Tom said quietly. Everyone deserves to be seen. Our eyes met across the table and something shifted. The air felt charged, full of possibility and danger. I looked away first, checking my watch. I should get home, I said. Of course, he replied, signaling for the check. This was nice, though, really nice. He insisted on paying, then walked me to my car. As I unlocked the door, he touched my arm gently. Alethea, he said, his voice softer than before. I hope this doesn't sound inappropriate, but if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who understands what it's like to feel unseen in your own life, I'm here. I drove home with my heart racing, Tom's words echoing in my head. When I arrived, Simon was in his home office, door closed, working on some project. Emily was doing homework at the kitchen table. How was your day, sweetie? I asked, kissing the top of her head. Good, she said without looking up. Daddy made mac and cheese for dinner. He saved you some. I found the container in the refrigerator. Store-bought mac and cheese. Not even the good kind. This was Simon's idea of taking care of me while I worked late. No questions about where I'd been. No curiosity about my day. Just efficient meal preservation. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Thanks for the drink. Hope you have a good weekend. I stared at the message for several minutes before responding, You too. See you Monday. But as I typed those innocent words, I knew something had changed. Tom saw me in a way Simon didn't. He valued my thoughts, my insights, my company. He made me feel alive in a way I'd forgotten was possible. I was playing with fire, and part of me didn't care if I got burned. 3 weeks later, I found myself standing in Romano's Italian bistro, watching Simon's face transform from confusion to humiliation as I delivered what I thought would be my moment of vindication. Instead, it became the beginning of my downfall. The evening had started innocently enough. Simon's 36th birthday fell on a Saturday, and I'd organized a dinner with close friends and family. Nothing elaborate, just the people who mattered most. Vivian had driven down from Boston, Jessica came with her boyfriend Marcus, and Colin and Leah joined us despite the growing tension I'd sensed from Leah at work. What I hadn't expected was for Simon to invite Tom. I thought it would be nice, Simon explained when Tom arrived at the restaurant. He's new in town, doesn't know many people yet. Colin suggested it. I felt my stomach flutter as Tom approached our table, looking handsome in dark jeans and a blue button-down shirt. Over the past 3 weeks, our relationship had deepened in ways I told myself were purely professional. We'd worked late together on several complex cases, grabbed coffee most afternoons, and exchanged increasingly personal text messages. Nothing physical had happened. I was very clear about that in my own mind, but the emotional connection was undeniable, and sitting across from both Tom and Simon felt like standing on a fault line. Dinner conversation flowed around topics of work, local politics, and Emily's school activities. I found myself hyper-aware of every interaction between Tom and me. The way he laughed at my jokes, how he asked follow-up questions about stories I told, the brief moment our hands brushed reaching for the breadbasket. Simon, meanwhile, seemed oblivious. He discussed his latest IT project with Colin, answered his mother's questions about the house's heating system, and thanked everyone politely for coming. Pleasant, courteous, and completely disconnected from any emotional undercurrent. The breaking point came when Jessica raised her wine glass for a toast. To Simon, she said, for being such a devoted husband and father, and for giving my sister the beautiful home she's always dreamed of. Everyone raised their glasses, and I felt the weight of expectation. This was my moment to play the grateful wife, to praise Simon's generosity and devotion. Instead, I felt a surge of resentment at the performance I was expected to give. Actually, I said, standing up with my own glass, I have something I need to share with everyone. Simon looked up at me with mild curiosity, probably expecting some sweet birthday tribute. Vivian smiled encouragingly. Tom's expression grew cautious. Simon is a good provider, I began, and I'm grateful for everything he's given us. But I think it's important to be honest about our marriage, especially with the people we care about most. The table grew quiet. Simon's smile faded. Recently, someone has shown me what it feels like to be truly seen and valued, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Tom Delaney has been nothing but professional and respectful, but his attention has made me realize how lonely I've been in my own marriage. Gasps around the table. Leah's face went white. Colin set down his fork with a sharp clink. Tom has expressed interest in me, I said, looking directly at Simon. And while I've made it clear that I'm committed to my marriage, his attention has highlighted some problems we need to address. This wasn't exactly true. Tom had never explicitly expressed romantic interest, though our conversations had grown increasingly intimate. But I needed everyone to understand that I was the victim here, the neglected wife who had remained faithful despite temptation. I'm telling you this publicly because I believe in honesty, I continued. I could have had an affair. Another woman might have. But instead, I'm choosing to be transparent about our problems so we can work on them. I sat down, expecting, what? Applause for my integrity, sympathy for my situation, support for my brave honesty. Instead, I was met with horrified silence. Simon's face had gone completely blank. Not angry, not hurt, just empty. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned to Tom. Is this true? He asked quietly. Tom's face was flushed red. Simon, we've become friends at work, good friends, but I've never crossed any lines. I would never disrespect your marriage. But you're attracted to my wife, Simon said. It wasn't a question. Tom glanced at me, then back at Simon. I think Alethea is a remarkable woman, but I've never acted on any feelings I might have. The admission hung in the air like poison gas. Leah stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is disgusting, she said, looking directly at me. Tom, we're leaving. Now. Colin threw his napkin on the table. I can't believe you'd do this to Simon, at his birthday dinner in front of his mother. I was being honest, I protested. I was trying to save our marriage by addressing our problems openly. By humiliating your husband in public. Vivian's voice was ice cold. By announcing that another man finds you attractive and you've encouraged it. I haven't encouraged anything, I snapped. I've been completely faithful. Faithful? Jessica's boyfriend Marcus spoke up for the first time all evening. Lady, you just announced your emotional affair to a room full of people and acted like you deserved a medal for it. Simon stood up slowly, pulled out his wallet, and placed enough cash on the table to cover the entire bill, plus tip. Thank you all for coming, he said in that same flat, professional tone he used for work meetings. I'm sorry the evening ended this way. He walked out without another word, leaving me sitting at a table full of people who were looking at me like I'd just committed murder. Alethea, Vivian said, her voice shaking with controlled fury, you have just made the biggest mistake of your life. One by one they left. Colin and Leah departed without saying goodbye. Marcus practically dragged Jessica away, despite her protests that she supported my honesty. Even Tom fled, muttering apologies to no one in particular. I sat alone at the table, surrounded by abandoned wine glasses and half-eaten meals, trying to understand how my moment of truth had gone so wrong. I'd been honest. I'd been faithful. I'd chosen my marriage over temptation. So why did I feel like I'd just destroyed everything? The drive home was a blur of streetlights and growing panic. I'd expected Simon to be waiting for me, ready to have the difficult conversation we'd been avoiding for months. Instead, I found the house dark, except for a single light in his home office. I knocked on the door. No answer. Simon, we need to talk about what happened tonight. No, came his voice through the door. We don't. I was trying to be honest with you. I was trying to save our marriage. Silence. Simon, please, I chose you. I chose our family. Doesn't that mean anything? The door opened. Simon stood there in his pajamas, looking older than I'd ever seen him. You chose to humiliate me in front of my mother, my friends, and a man I invited to my birthday dinner, he said quietly. You chose to announce your emotional affair like it was some kind of virtue. You chose to make our private problems into public entertainment. It wasn't an affair, I protested. Nothing happened. Something happened, Simon replied. You fell in love with someone else. You may not have slept with him, but you gave him parts of yourself that used to belong to me. And then you announced it to the world like I should be grateful. He started to close the door, then paused. I'm sleeping in the guest room, he said. We'll figure out the rest later. The door closed with a soft click, leaving me standing in the hallway of our beautiful house, finally understanding that honesty without wisdom is just cruelty in disguise. The next 2 weeks passed in a fog of tense silence and growing isolation. Simon moved through our house like a ghost, present but untouchable, polite but distant. He made breakfast for Emily, helped with her homework, and maintained all his parental responsibilities with mechanical precision, but he spoke to me only when absolutely necessary and never about anything personal. Daddy, why are you sleeping in the other room? Emily asked one morning over cereal. Just temporarily, sweetheart, Simon replied, not looking at me. Sometimes grown-ups need space to think about important things. Are you and Mommy getting divorced like Tommy Patterson's parents? My heart clenched. Simon's expression softened as he knelt beside Emily's chair. We're working through some problems, he said gently, but no matter what happens between Mommy and me, we both love you very much. That will never change. It was the most emotional I'd seen him since the restaurant disaster, and it wasn't even directed at me. Work became my refuge, though even that was complicated. Tom had grown distant and professional since the birthday dinner, limiting our interactions to strictly business matters. The easy camaraderie we'd shared was gone, replaced by awkward formality. I think I should request a transfer to a different department, he said during one of our few private conversations. That's not necessary, I replied, though part of me knew he was right. We're adults. We can work together professionally. Alethea, he said, his voice pained, I never meant for any of this to happen. I never intended to cause problems in your marriage. You didn't cause anything, I insisted. My marriage was already in trouble. You just helped me see it clearly. But even as I said the words, I wondered if they were true. Had my marriage been failing? Or had I simply convinced myself it was to justify my growing feelings for Tom? Leah had stopped speaking to me entirely, communicating only through terse emails about work matters. The few times we encountered each other in the break room or hallways, she looked through me like I was invisible. She's being ridiculous, I complained to Jessica during one of our phone calls. I didn't actually do anything wrong. Maybe not technically, Jessica replied, but you have to admit the whole birthday dinner thing was pretty brutal. I was being honest. I was trying to save my marriage. By announcing your crush on another man in front of everyone. Alethea, I love you, but that wasn't honesty. That was sabotage. Even Jessica was turning against me. I felt like the whole world had decided I was the villain in a story where I'd tried to be the hero. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening when I discovered Simon in his home office, surrounded by manila folders and legal documents. He was methodically organizing papers into neat stacks, his laptop open to what looked like financial spreadsheets. What are you doing? I asked from the doorway. He looked up, his expression unreadable. Organizing our documents. I stepped closer and saw folder labels. Household expenses, Emily's school records, insurance policies, and most ominously, custody documentation. Custody? My voice came out as a whisper. Simon, what are you planning? I'm being prepared, he said calmly, returning to his paperwork. It's what I do. Prepared for what? He finally looked at me directly, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger, not hurt, but complete emotional detachment. "For whatever comes next," he said. "You made it clear at my birthday dinner that you're not happy in this marriage. You're in love with another man. You've checked out emotionally. I'm simply acknowledging reality and planning accordingly." "I'm not in love with Tom," I protested, "and I haven't checked out of our marriage." "Haven't you?" Simon asked quietly. "When was the last time you asked me about my day? When was the last time you showed any interest in my thoughts, my feelings, my life? You've been emotionally absent for months, Alethea. Tom just gave you an excuse to admit it publicly." His words hit like physical blows because they contained uncomfortable grains of truth. I had stopped asking about his projects, stopped caring about his interests, stopped seeing him as anything more than a provider and co-parent. "That's not fair," I said weakly. "Isn't it?" He turned back to his documents. "You fell in love with Tom because he paid attention to you, because he made you feel seen and valued. But you never considered that maybe I felt just as unseen, just as undervalued. The difference is, I didn't go looking for validation from someone else. So this is my fault. Everything that's wrong with our marriage is my fault." "No," Simon said, his voice maddeningly calm. "But your response to our problems is your responsibility, and you chose to handle it in the most destructive way possible." I wanted to scream at him, to provoke some kind of emotional reaction. His reasonable, measured responses made me feel like I was going crazy. "You're punishing me for being honest," I accused. "I'm protecting myself and our daughter from further humiliation," he corrected. "There's a difference." That night, I lay awake in our empty bedroom, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. 3 weeks ago, I'd felt like I was taking control of my life, being brave and honest about my needs. Now I felt like I was drowning in consequences I hadn't anticipated. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, I hoped it might be Tom, reaching out to check on me. Instead, it was from Vivian. "I'm very disappointed in you, Alethea. Simon deserves better." Even my mother-in-law was weighing in. I deleted the message without responding, but her words echoed in my head. Simon deserves better. Did he? Or was everyone just taking his side because he was playing the victim? The next morning, I found Simon in the kitchen making coffee with his usual efficiency. Emily was still asleep upstairs. "We need to talk," I said. "No," he replied without looking up. "We don't." "Yes, we do. This silent treatment has gone on long enough. We're married, Simon. We have a child together. We can't just stop communicating." He poured his coffee, added cream with precise movements, and finally turned to face me. "You want to communicate?" he asked. "Fine. Here's what I have to say. You betrayed our marriage emotionally, if not physically. You humiliated me publicly. You showed complete disrespect for our family and our friends. And instead of apologizing or taking responsibility, you keep insisting you did nothing wrong." I'm not finished," he continued, his voice still eerily calm. "I've spent 2 weeks thinking about our marriage, our problems, and our future. I've come to some conclusions." My heart started racing. "What conclusions?" "That's between me and my attorney," he said, picking up his coffee and heading toward the door. "Your attorney?" The words came out as a shriek. "Simon, you can't be serious." He paused at the doorway and looked back at me one final time. "I'm always serious, Alethea. You should know that by now." He left for work, leaving me standing in our beautiful kitchen, finally understanding that my quest for honesty had led me somewhere I never intended to go. The legal papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who asked for my signature with professional indifference. I signed for the envelope with shaking hands, somehow knowing that my life was about to change forever. Inside were documents that made everything brutally real: petition for divorce, temporary custody agreement, financial disclosure requirements, and a restraining order preventing me from accessing our joint accounts without court approval. I sank onto the living room couch, the expensive sectional Simon had chosen for our beautiful new house. and read through the papers with growing horror. Simon had been thorough, methodical, and completely prepared. Every detail of our financial life was documented, every asset accounted for, every legal requirement anticipated. Most devastating was the custody proposal. Simon was requesting primary physical custody of Emily, with me getting supervised visitation until the court can determine the stability of the respondent's living situation and emotional state. Supervised visitation, like I was some kind of danger to my own daughter. I called Jessica immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. "He's trying to take Emily away from me," I sobbed into the phone. "He's claiming I'm unstable. Jessica, what am I going to do?" "Slow down," she said, though her voice sounded strained. "What exactly do the papers say?" I read through the most damaging sections, my voice breaking on phrases like emotional instability, inappropriate workplace relationships, and public humiliation of family members. "This is insane," I said. "I never had an affair. I was honest about my feelings. How is that grounds for supervised visitation?" Jessica was quiet for a long moment. "Alethea, I love you, but you have to understand how this looks to other people. You announced your attraction to another man at your husband's birthday dinner. You've been having what sounds like an emotional affair for weeks. And from what Marcus tells me, everyone at that dinner was horrified by your behavior. You're taking his side too." I couldn't believe it. My own sister was abandoning me. "I'm not taking sides," Jessica said carefully, "but I think you need to get a lawyer and figure out how to make this right. Simon's not playing games here. These papers are serious." After hanging up, I called in sick to work and spent the day researching divorce attorneys. Every consultation fee was hundreds of dollars I couldn't access because Simon had frozen our joint accounts. I had my own checking account with maybe $3,000. Enough for a retainer, but not much more. The attorney I finally met with, Patricia Hendricks, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who listened to my story with increasing skepticism. "Let me understand this," she said, reviewing the papers Simon had filed. "You publicly announced your attraction to a co-worker at your husband's birthday party, in front of his family and friends." "I was being honest about problems in our marriage," I explained. "I was trying to address issues before they became worse." "And you've been having what you describe as an emotional relationship with this co-worker for several weeks." "We're friends. We talk about work, about life. Nothing physical has happened." Patricia removed her glasses and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Moorcroft, I'm going to be blunt with you. Your husband has built a very strong case. He has documentation of your behavior, witness statements from the birthday dinner, and what appears to be evidence of your inappropriate relationship with this Tom Delaney." "What evidence?" My heart stopped. She consulted the papers. "Text messages, email communications, witness statements about your behavior at work. Your husband has been very thorough." I thought about all those late-night text conversations with Tom, the personal emails we'd exchanged, the long lunches, and after-work drinks. Had Simon been monitoring my communications? How? "The supervised visitation clause is particularly concerning," Patricia continued. "Your husband is arguing that your emotional instability and poor judgment make you a potential risk to your daughter's well-being. That's ridiculous. I'm a good mother." "I'm sure you are. But courts take these allegations seriously, especially when there's documented evidence of erratic behavior." I left the attorney's office feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Simon had outmaneuvered me completely. While I'd been focused on my feelings and my needs, he'd been quietly building a legal case that painted me as an unstable, unfaithful wife and potentially unfit mother. Work became a nightmare. Tom had requested his transfer and would be moving to a different department at the end of the week. Our few interactions were stilted and uncomfortable, both of us aware that our every conversation was probably being scrutinized. "I'm sorry," he said, during what would be our last private conversation. "I never meant for any of this to happen." I know, I replied, though I was starting to wonder if that was entirely true. Had Tom pursued me knowing I was vulnerable? Had he enjoyed the attention from a married woman? Or had I misread our entire relationship? Leah had apparently filed a complaint with HR about inappropriate workplace relationships creating a hostile environment. I was called into a meeting with our supervisor and given a formal warning about maintaining professional boundaries. "We're not taking disciplinary action at this time," my supervisor explained, "but we want to be clear that personal relationships cannot interfere with the workplace environment." I wanted to protest that I'd done nothing wrong, but the words felt hollow even to me. Maybe I hadn't had a physical affair, but I'd certainly crossed emotional boundaries. I'd sought intimacy and validation from someone other than my husband, and I'd done it in a way that made my colleagues uncomfortable. The worst part was Emily's confusion. She knew something was wrong, but couldn't understand why Daddy was sleeping in the guest room, why Mummy cried so much, why the house felt different. "Are you and Daddy getting divorced?" she asked one evening while I was helping her with homework. I wanted to lie, to protect her from the ugly reality of what was happening. But I'd already learned that my version of honesty could be destructive. "Daddy and I are having some problems," I said carefully. "We're trying to figure out what's best for our family." "Is it because of that man from your work?" My blood ran cold. "What do you know about that, sweetheart?" "I heard you and Daddy talking, and Grandma Vivian said something to Aunt Jessica about you liking someone else." Even my 6-year-old daughter knew about my emotional affair. The humiliation was complete. That night, after Emily was asleep, I confronted Simon in his office. "You've been planning this for weeks," I accused. "All that time you were acting hurt and distant. You were building a case against me." He looked up from his laptop, his expression unchanged. "I was protecting my interests and my daughter's future. By making me look like an unfit mother. By documenting the truth," he said calmly. "You made choices, Alethea. I'm simply ensuring those choices have appropriate consequences." "Appropriate consequences? You're trying to take my daughter away from me." "I'm trying to provide Emily with a stable home environment," he corrected. "Something you seem incapable of maintaining." His words were like ice water. This wasn't the man I'd married, the one who'd been patient and understanding even when I'd been difficult. This was someone I didn't recognize, cold, calculating, and completely unmoved by my distress. "I made a mistake," I said, my voice breaking. "I admit that, but I don't deserve this." Simon saved his work and closed his laptop with deliberate precision. "You didn't make a mistake, Alethea," he said quietly. "You made a series of deliberate choices over several weeks. You chose to pursue an emotional relationship with another man. You chose to humiliate me publicly. You chose to prioritize your feelings over our family's well-being. Now you get to live with the consequences of those choices." He stood up and walked past me toward the door, then paused. "My attorney will be in touch about the custody evaluation," he said. "I suggest you prepare accordingly." I was left alone in his office, surrounded by the evidence of his meticulous planning, finally understanding that the man I'd thought would always forgive me had been quietly, methodically, and completely legally destroying the life I'd taken for granted. 6 months later, I was alone in a tiny studio, holding the final decree that gave Simon everything he'd asked for: primary custody of Emily, the house, most of our assets, and a clean narrative of me as the at-fault spouse whose public honesty had blown up our life. Tom had run back to his ex, Leah had my old job, even Jessica spoke to me with caution after watching my daughter get dragged through custody evaluations. When Simon came by with photos of Emily thriving, school plays, soccer games, birthday parties I hadn't been invited to, he told me she was happy and that he'd forgiven me, but that forgiveness didn't erase consequences. He was seeing someone new, Catherine, a teacher Emily liked, and I realized he finally had the steady, respectful partnership I'd refused to give him. After he left, I understood I hadn't just lost a husband and a home. I'd lost my daughter's daily trust, my friends' respect, and any right to see myself as the victim. I'd called it honesty and bravery, but it was selfish cruelty, and Simon had handled it all properly, calmly, legally, and with devastating effectiveness. Emily was safe and loved, and that, I realized, was the only redemption I'd earned.